So I'm very pleased to introduce to us Dr. Kalu Idika Kalu, who was born on October 14, 1939 in Umuahia, Abia State. He's a distinguished economist, as you all know, a public servant and statesman whose career has significantly influenced Nigeria's economic landscape and influenced so many people like my humble self. Dr. Kalu Idika Kalu holds a bachelor's degree in economics, 1964, a master's of art degree in economics, 1965, and a PhD in economic development and public finance, 1972, from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. He also served as a Stimson Fellow at Yale University. Dr. Kalu's professional journey includes academic roles at the University of Nigeria, Enugu campus, and the University of Wisconsin. He later joined the World Bank East Asia and African Pacific Program, contributing to economic analysis of countries such as Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. In Nigeria, he first served as Commissioner for Finance and Economic Planning in the old Imo State from 1984 to 1985, where he advocated for macroeconomic reforms and privatization strategies. At the federal level, Dr. Kalu was appointed Minister of Finance twice, 1985 to 1986, and 1993 to 1994. And then Minister of National Planning and Minister of Transport. So you can see he served the nation in various capacities. Notably, during his time as Minister of Finance, he introduced the value-added tax system, which still remains a fiscal reform that remains integral to Nigeria's revenue framework. Internationally, Dr. Kalu has held prominent positions, including chairman of the ECOWAS Council of Ministers and chairman of the World Bank's Development Committee. His political engagement included a presidential bid in 2003 under the new Nigeria People's Party, NNPP. And he has also been affiliated with both the People's Democratic Party and the All Progressive Congress, advocating for a robust two-party system in Nigeria. In recognition of Dr. Kalu's service, he was awarded national honors of Commander of the Order of Niger, CON, and later Officer of the Order of Federal Republic, OFR. As the presenter of this year's anniversary lecture, Dr. Kalu brings a wealth of experience and insight into economic development and public policy, and he offers valuable perspectives on Nigeria's past, on Nigeria's present, and Nigeria's future trajectories. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming somebody who has inspired me, somebody who has inspired many Nigerians, somebody who has worked so hard for this nation, our guest lecturer today, Dr. Kalu Idika Kalu, OFR. Thank you.
Can you all hear me? I will follow the already established protocols, but let me just, as is proper, recognize the Executive Governor of Abia State. He's already been duly recognized and identified as the guy who's holding the mantle, who's holding the beacon. and we are so proud to be here. As Abians, as Nigerians. So I want to specially thank Dr. Alex Otti, his wife. I know she's not here, because they always say behind every successful man there's a woman. I think that is very true in this case. I met her just a few days ago. I'm sure I've met her on other occasions, but she's there by her husband, smiling, supporting him fully to do the great job that he has started. I also want to acknowledge the presence of the deputy, our own Umuahia man, who's right beside you. We are very proud of you. The protocol is a long one, and perhaps I should be excused, but I have so many friends here, Generally Hijrika, and of course our son who is representing us in the house, Ibe or someone. And wow, if I start now, I won't stop. So let's recognize members of the cabinet who are here, the indefatigable team, Chief of Staff, members of the House of Reps, our traditional rulers we should always recognize. When we talk about development, we have to always assume that development can only take place when there is social mobilization. There's a German who called it social mobilization. Karl Deutsch is very true. And I'm sure we have other protagonists of that particular idea. And if I might say that Dr. Alex Otti's stewardship is a very key demonstration of the efficacy, running around various capitals, shaking hands, and signing up things that may not necessarily be in the best interest of that your constituency. So social mobilization of the women in faraway villages, in various trades, transporters, hunters, producers in every field. If not, you find that this concept of social mobilization is so important. I'm particularly happy to be here today because of what we are celebrating. If you travel around the world, you hear it from all kinds of corners in a very amazing way. It is being said that something has been happening in Abia. A bit of that is being said about a few others, but I think the one of Abia stands out clearly. From Abians, from non-Abians, from non-Nigerians, from Europeans and others. They note that something is happening. So I want to start with some preliminary comments, some of which will now be reflected, of course, in what I have written earlier. I've set out a few things here. Well, before I go to that, let me acknowledge others. I've talked about our traditional rulers. Of course, the media are very important. The media is very important. The media is under censure, under scrutiny. Abilities. You are ready to provide a framework, an ordered fashion that helps everybody to think about the needs of the society and to govern with a heart as much as with the law. The last speaker talked about structural adjustment program. In fact, the first document of the structural adjustment program was the one we produced on the Korean economy. Korea was producing manufactured goods, timber, plywood, wigs, and so on and so forth, and a bit of petroleum products. And then sometime in 1973, the OPEC countries decided to raise the price of oil, and that put a lot of them who depended on importing oil to get the petrochemicals and other derivatives for the manufacture of synthetics and so on. So the whole essence of that structural adjustment was, how do you help this country move to a different level, which required a change in the composition of what it produces. A change in the composition of what you produce will imply a different way of training your labor. So there will be structural change in your labor force. It required a different level of use of energy. In essence, it requires structurally adjusting your productive process to meet new domestic demand as well as external demand. That's what it means. Of course, if one went around the room here and asked about 10 people, how do you label such a thing? You can call it by any name. Some will say new economic policy, new development planning, a new reorganization of production. So the first thing I want us to forget when by the time we leave this room is that structural adjustment was so misunderstood, we got so confused. But that wasn't the essence of what the policy was supposed to be. It abstracts from the effectiveness with which the policies address the problems they are directed to solve. So they can be good, they can be bad, they can be effective, and of course they are themselves also, by the very nature of the term, also subject to constant change as you move from producing just palm kernels, palm oil, or rubber and cocoa into higher derivative, different products, as you move from supplying certain products of this nature into in trade, in terms of direct commodities, as you move into higher levels of valorization, higher value added. So that was a confusion that didn't need to be. So I hope that by now, the tendency to look at it as something that happened in the past will be clearly a very erroneous concept. It is something that is continually going on. The programs, the fantastic programs that our state governor and his team have fashioned to redirect Abia, education, power, farming, the manpower, in all the sectors, as we've been told. This could be called a new structural adjustment program for Abia State, and that applies to other states and to the federal government, to the extent that we have this structured effort to refashion how you produce to meet new tastes, new patterns of trade, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to say more than that in this preliminary one. The next thing I want to talk about is the borrowing. I was once invited to speak in, I think it was in Akwa Ibom, and somebody who was very close to the governor then said, and we did all this, we didn't borrow a kobo. So I was supposed to applaud, but I think the governor then knew that I was not going to necessarily applaud that. So the point I want to make is, we have come to a stage where we are worrying about the penchant for borrowing. Borrowing by the financial system, borrowing by the executive in terms of sovereign borrowing all over. It doesn't need much to be said or to be argued about that. For a country that has so much capacity for development, but with that capacity, the only way you can turn that capacity into the things that we really need, you have to invest. When you've identified what you need to invest in, at any given point in time, your savings capacity to address that investment may be equal, more or less. And this is where borrowing comes in. In other words, there is nothing inherently clearly wrong with borrowing. You borrow because you already perceive you are going to create a value. Well, Johnson Chukwu is here. Maybe he will have some other ways of describing some of these things. You are creating a value. If you are creating a value, essentially, roughly, you weigh the value you are creating against what it will cost you to secure that additional capital. And that is where the borrowing comes in. So it would be rather foolish to keep people at a certain level of consumption, at a certain level of living, standard of living, where you can finance more to supplement your current savings so that the investment you make now in the midterm or in the long term will now bring in all these resources that will enhance your welfare, your health, your consumption of other services and so on and so forth. So that is the third thing I want to talk about. Our state government, they've got such brilliant ideas. They should not be henpecked. I know there could be, they've not borrowed. You should borrow, but when you borrow, it should be obvious that you have to do it in order to reduce the time frame from bringing in new benefits, services, and so on to the population. Another point, these are all things that affect the Nigerian economy generally, before we now go to the Abia State issue. A level playing field. I don't think one needs to go into a lot of discussion about that. A level playing field means you are providing the same opportunities for everybody. And that is how more capacity can be created by those who are best able to create that capacity. People come in at different levels of their innate capacity, but everybody is given a level playing field. Well, one of the worst aberrations of not having a level playing field we had about a week ago. I still haven't nailed down the source of it, because that would be really terrible if it is seen that people who are in responsible positions want to alter the level playing field. And when you do that for young children, it's incalculable harm that you are doing to the entire society. Not just to the cohort of those who are addressing this inequity, but it affects the entire economy. So we need to make sure that we give people a level playing field. In fact, for some time now, I've advocated that all these presumably permissible affirmative actions where you are locating different cutoff points for different parts. Well, a few years, whatever, it's not the thing to do. The thing to do is to address the sources of this imbalance by placing more facilities to bring up all those who may see themselves as needing this affirmative action. So, not to talk of where so many years later we're talking about introducing a most unequal level playing field for youngsters who are just starting their life in education. The next point I want to underscore is the rule of law. We talk about it. It's so important. We don't need any law professor to really go to town on this before we realize that. For people to move around, for people to take initiative, for people to enter contracts, for people to take, serious risks in what they do in order to create wealth, there has to be the rule of law that can be cited and adjudicated, and infractions are punished. Everybody has the same expectations. In other words, nobody should be able to exercise any meaningful impunity, because the society expects that this is the way things should be done. It may seem simple. This is the way things should be done. The queue has to be respected. The structure of grading has to be respected. Once this is violated, it should be clear to everybody, regardless of where they come from, that those who will now put the punishment itself has to be subject to rule of law, not arbitrary. And I mention this because lately we hear a lot about all kinds of shoddy deals being meted out to all sorts of people. Certain growth of impunity. This is very important. And if you have impunity so pervasive in a society, that society cannot be said to be modernizing. Well, we can talk about peace and stability. That one is obvious enough. And then talk about traditions and modernization. If you went to East Asia, like where I worked as a staff of the World Bank, Korea, Taiwan, Japan, China, you can see this interplay of tradition and modernization. We don't have to be ashamed of our traditions. Our traditions have been modernized over the ages, and they continue to evolve. We don't need to throw away our traditions, our language, our culture, but as I said, this is not something that needs to be flogged. Now, in looking at what this administration has achieved within 2 years, that's why we are here really. I've identified certain sectors. I'm not going to be quoting the numbers. I've got some of the numbers, and His Excellency was so touched by some of the comments I had made that he thought no matter how much time I had, that I could be taken around to just see a few of the things. Well, he'll be surprised I'm citing this. I mean, the guy is so sure. It's not, I just come, I read some papers, and I write a paper, and I present it here. He was saying, oh, you can go around and see a few places. Unfortunately, I didn't have that much time, but I did have some time to visit some places. Health is so important. It's a shame that a country of our size, up to now, you can see what is happening because of some other things we'll be talking about later. One of the burdens that we are bearing is just the cost of critical health care. I'm not even about general health care, critical health care. You hear people coming up with different kinds of diseases that we are not really fully identified. I'm not saying they are more prevalent now than they were before. But at this stage, I know we've made steps at creating a national health insurance. This is a very critical area. Nigeria, a few years ago, was projected to be one of the largest countries by 2050. They said would be right behind India, that will have overtaken China. Maybe they've already overtaken China. I'm not quite sure where the relative positions stand at this time. We are going to be number 3. Just the idea itself. After China, 1 billion people, India, 1 billion people, and here comes Nigeria ahead of Brazil, Indonesia, Bangladesh, which are some of the large ones. United States, Nigeria will be number 3. Clearly, we cannot make it if we are not going to do something about our health sector. So this is very, very critical, and I put that, not that it's that much more important, but in terms of a critical assessment of order of importance, certainly putting health as number 1 is not that much displaced. Of course, if we don't do anything about it, that may be a reason why by 2050 we will not have met the goal. And that goal of just being number 3 in population is not something we should be so proud of in terms of just numerical numbers. It should also connote a certain level of well-being. The good Lord has given us everything. Minerals, riverine, vegetation, name it. We have it all to grow our population. That's why we are that many in the first place. But with the dynamics of population change, with the dynamics of agricultural practices, with the contribution from the climate change that's also affecting human settlements and so on all over the world. There are acute reasons why we must pay attention to the health of the infant, the health of the nursing mother, and the general health of different cohorts in the population, from young adults to adolescents, and of course, the old and the infirm. So the health sector is very important. So I'm not surprised that this state government has identified this as very critical. And one of the places I was shown was a new facility. I didn't go inside, but I saw a new facility that clearly compares with any of its peers in other states. Of course, if you say health, we always say health and education. I've already averted to the fact that we must maintain level playing field, we must be fair, there must be rule of law, there must be absence of impunity. And when these things are infringed upon, and you talk about adults, you can argue about that, but when it is against youngsters starting school, finishing primary school, finishing high school, seeking for positions in higher education, it's a crime against the society for anybody to interfere with the rule of law, with the sort of adoption of set principles for making sure that the selective process takes place. And of course, this don't condemn anybody to a life pattern of anything, but it is that selective process that enables you to know what you have to do to those who may not be so endowed. And when we are talking about human endowment in education, the mistakes we make is to think that it is something permanent. This is also subject to evolution. I don't think many of us necessarily subscribe to this notion that, oh, some people are so smart, others are not so smart. The society has to see this as its role to equalize natural endowments by providing specific facilities, not by adopting policies to obviate the normal order of things. Well, economic growth and development. When I was a commissioner in Imo State years back, I know it was called, there was a ministry called Ministry of Economic Development. When I came in there, I said, no, we have to change it to planning. Development involves every ministry, so there cannot be really a Ministry of Economic Development. You can trust me, when I came to Lagos shortly thereafter, I did the same thing. And I said, no, we can't be calling it a Ministry of Economic Development. But the only reason I'm flagging this is that, yes, growth, where you are adding to quantums of physical production and physical facilities. But what growth really derives its entire relevance is where it contributes to development of the individual, development in every sphere. So I also know that this administration has been emphasizing this global sense of growth and development. If you have growth, accretion of higher numbers, and this does not result in development, all-round development, including the maintenance of an order society with rule of law, peace and stability, then something is wrong. The next point I want to underscore, and these are all what I derive from just looking at some of the policies I have noted here, the place of social and hard infrastructure. Hard infrastructure, roads, bridges, transportation, communications, these are very, very important. And I think the government really has shown its mettle by ensuring that we do not just have contracts. This looks like a joke. Everywhere we talk about contracts, and then the contracts are not really carried out the way they are supposed to be. So a painstaking evaluation of identifying what the society needs and then going forth to provide the social and hard infrastructure. The social infrastructure, of course, all the things having to do with perquisites, insurance, and so on and so forth. Next one I want to talk about together is power, water, and housing. Power, I did speak with the governor briefly about that. Water and housing. They've not left any of that out. They are working on this, and I believe that part of the work I did at the World Bank, these were institutions set out to make sure that you do not necessarily get given a wrong term because you are a small economy or you don't have a high enough savings. But by identifying these key issues, power, water, housing, and delimiting a sort of stepwise development, you can do it on as large a scale as your finances can take you to. These days, there's a tendency for us to circumscribe. Nothing wrong with it, but you can do better by making sure that you look afield to make sure that the projects you want to implement are large enough such that the overall unit cost will be as small as possible. And even more important than the unit cost, that you are able to reach as much of your population as possible. Of course, beyond that, communities can still go, depending on their ability, financial, technical, with assistance beyond the particular community, to do some of their own. But a state or group of states, and certainly at the federal level, the idea should be to identify the stage of development of that economy and make sure that they make investments not just for certain communities, not just for the higher classes as it was said, but you have to think about those in the rural areas, in the small towns, in the cities, those who need it for their homes and those who need it for their industries. So these are some of the things I already have decided I'm going to pursue after this discussion to see what is happening at the federal level. Because I think there has developed a tendency for bifurcating some of these things. We need waterworks. We don't need boreholes. Boreholes are necessary to supplement. But we should reinstate the big programs that are address the needs of the bigger populations, the larger cities, the larger regions, exploiting our natural resources to make sure that the dams and so on and so forth are funded appropriately, because they will provide more steady services at least cost. So we have to watch it so that we do not now circumscribe everything to communities and to small towns or to regions of the state and so on. So you should get back to those large scales, because that's why these institutions that will give you those facilities, once they are appraised, no hanky-panky about hidden costs or extra this or that. I think, if I may say so, haven't had the experience. This is why some of these countries grew so fast, and we have had such a hard time coming close. When I worked on Korea, despite the fact that they don't have all these resources, Korea was growing at 16% in real terms. It was a wonder. When we present the projects to the board, people are asking questions. They had a labor force, trained labor force, but they tried to stick to the fundamental principles. These principles are not different here in Africa or in Nigeria or in Abia State than what they are in Latin America or Asia. So we are at a watershed where we seem to be going in the other direction. With all the goodwill in the world, some of these facilities have to get back to where they are big projects. In the early 60s, when I returned from study in the US, I think there was a very good attempt to mobilize our gas to create massive thermal plants. If we had done that now, nobody, some friends here visited even Ghana nearby, or Malaysia and some of these places. You go to some of these places, they don't know anything about generator. They don't talk about boreholes. They talk about schemes, power systems, water systems. We need to get back there. And I think that our state governor, with the experience he's had, will be among those that will also champion. It's like returning to common sense for some of these things that are not really meant for every backyard. Every backyard has a borehole, every house has a generator, and so on and so forth. Lastly, I'll just pinpoint 2 or 3 other areas. Jobs, useful engagement. If we are going to be number 3 by 2050, we have to think seriously how we are going to keep the labor force usefully engaged. We are going to be growing broadly, more vastly leaning on our resources, and never mind what our new man in Washington is talking about. It is trade and development. That's the name of the game. It is not circumscribed within your own corner. Whatever happens in America, I can assure you, it's not going to turn back the clog of transnational cooperation, because this is the means by which you can grow the economy, grow the incomes, and grow the welfare of regions, of planets, indeed, just about the whole of mankind. So we can address these problems without getting into all the theatricals that we've been reading so much about in the news. So useful employment gets a new focus when we are talking about being number 3. We are not going to be number 3 with the kind of job creation that we are having now. So much more. Macroeconomics, microeconomics, development of all kinds of sectors that require mass consumption and mass employment, tourism, and so on and so forth. I've already talked about welfare and safety net. Welfare and safety net connote the fact that Nigeria, with all the resources we've had, should not be having people lying around beggars, homeless, people who have health problems that are being exhibited by being carried around where people stop, you throw a penny at them and pass on. Our society has to get out of that, to create useful employment, to take care of the infirm, people who've been injured, people who were had by accidents of birth, cannot really walk around like you and I. This is how to create a wholesome society. I've gone around Umuahia. I can't say I see so many beggars here, and I will flag it for our governor. That is his mindset already. As was said by the guy who introduced us here, somebody who cares. He cares. You can see it, his enthusiasm. You can see it in the way he moves with his team. All these extensive protocols are not there. He cares for these things. So if we are going to grow and be number 3 population-wise, we must find a way of making sure that those who are not so fortunate by birth, by intellect, or by accidents, or whatever, the society has to think of how to take care of them. And many of them can even contribute. I mean, we're not talking about Paralympics and the rest of it. Those are already there. But many of them, you don't have to ride a bus to be useful, to do something useful. So taking care of the young, the aged, and the infirm, that is another issue I wanted to flag. Security, we've already adverted to. Security, rights of citizenship, and national defense. Well, I was sitting by General Ihejirika here. This is an area, you know, when he became Chief of Army Staff, everybody was so enthusiastic, the way he, you know, he came into the picture and so on and so forth. Well, that is what we have to get back to. I didn't intend to stand here and start raising a lot of controversial issues, but you can virtually not avoid it, because unless you don't mean well for our future. The issue of security, the issue of citizenship, we are talking about questioning people who are supposed to be, we are not so sure they are citizens, going around the whole place. There are very simple ways of doing this. There's a constitution, there's a law, but a lot of these things take a teeth from the way they are administered by various levels. Whether it's a group of states, like you talk about the Southeast states, should be able to know who are within the area, who are non-Nigerians, who are hiding in the bushes or wherever it is, and so on and so forth. And we all should be interested in national defense. National defense should be built up on a level playing field. It's not it's not what is just meant for the Ndibo or Nausa or Yoruba or Bini or Benue and so on and so forth. Yes, there are free selections of careers and so on and so forth, but every effort has to be made by those who head our various intelligence. It goes without saying, if you don't have intelligence manned by people from all parts of the country, I'm sure Idika will agree with me and put it even more succinctly, that means you are on your own already undermining your intelligence and defense and security when you bring in laws that seem to imply that you are not doing recruitment as you should. Well, I don't know whether that is happening, but there's a sense that we may be moving more and more in that direction. It's very ill-advised. The constitution and state structure. Some of us are intimately involved at various levels with this continuous view of how we are all joined together. There should never be any need to question the need for the citizens every once in a while to say, hey, let's look at this structure. Let's look at the constitution. Is this serving our purpose? Purposes that those who take office have to swear to uphold the constitution and so on and so forth. Are the things they are upholding in the best interest of members of the state, of all citizens in the country? So constitution, the structure of states, some say we have overdone it in terms of the division from 2 to 3 to 4 to 19 to 20 something. Now we are talking about 36. And just a few weeks ago, I don't know any, well, Honorable Ibe will be here to tell me what they are coming up with now. They want to raise it to 50. So we have as many states as the US. That cannot be a rationale for just, for subdividing. But what works for the people is what we should be aiming out. And finally, as I said, before I now go to look at my former presentation, we need to have our governors, we need to have our politicians, we need to have our leaders. And indeed, our traditional rulers, they have a role to play. We need to relook the political culture that we are fostering in this place. There are all kinds of negative attributes that have been used to describe what you might call the impoverishment of our political culture. The culture should be one that promotes the interests of democracy. We've all accepted democracy because that's already in line with our traditional culture. It's not something imposed. In the worst case of rulership, every segment of our society is this question of consultation, open selection, open approval. So for us to now get into quote and unquote modern cultures where we are beginning to use impunity, where we are beginning to shorten discussion, where we are beginning to quiet constructive criticism and dissent, then we know we are moving in the wrong way. So these are just preliminary comments. So as I said, I was happy when I was told that I have so much time to speak.
Experience this smooth and strong feeling that consistently surpasses expectation. Leading the way in high-performance lubricants, Master Supermoto Oil is as durable as titanium.
Good governance. That is what this administration is all about. Good governance is what good leadership is all about. A leadership that takes its time to appraise and duly consider the lay of the land, as it were. A leadership that quietly asks itself what its prime constituency is all about. The spread of its people all over the land, their social and economic conditions, the state of health, economic, social, and political harmony, in sum, the quality of peace and its sustainability. Without peace and security, we strive in vain to build, to go to farms, to repair and upgrade basic amenities, and undertake critical infrastructures. I will apologize if some of this will now sound a bit repetitive, but I had written this before I got here. The sounds and sights coming out of our state, Abia State, from the inception of the Alex Otti Democratic Consultative Suzerainty, I call it, suggests that this painstaking homework has been the hallmark. This view has remained pervasive at home and beyond the state, and most profoundly in all corners in diaspora. You should hear how people in diaspora who know that some of us are here, the kinds of things they say, the questions they raise. It is very, very ennobling. So I think we have to thank our team for what they are doing. Well, good news with little substance can spread like wildfire, but it soon dissipates in no time. We must give our Almighty God, as Reverend Aruolo in his prayer said, the praise and the honor for bringing up our governor, Dr. Alex Otti. I have to apologize that he's here and getting all this accolade, but I think it's well deserved. To sustain the sounds and sights of great achievements consistently at a high pitch that has grown from strength to strength for this last 24 months. And for the prospect of greater things to come, appearing ever so brighter. Governor Otti's tenure has been truly transformative. I intend only here to identify only a few of the widely and easily available evidence to buttress the reasons why Ibians are so enthused by these mere 2 years of solid stewardship. The governor, his deputy, as they would say in those old Portuguese days, our man, is our man. And indeed, their hardworking lieutenants have demonstrated uncommon camaraderie. I say this with due humility, that I know such dedication when I see it. Such dedication was in the old Imo State that I was intimately a part of. That's what led to what has since gone into economic history as the Imo formula. So we are going to find a formula for the Abia success. Well, we may leave it to more scholarly people. What has emerged in our God's own state has been spectacular so far. Shall we dub it the Abia Initiative? Scholars would undoubtedly be more original in identifying the near miraculous transformation that all Abians have been raving about over the past months of the Otti administration. It seemed that this public approbation took a long time coming as a truly deserving socio-economic mobilization of a richly endowed and truly blessed corner of our great nation. For this great gathering here, both here and out there in the media and online, for all those attentively glued to this hallmark event, I should only summarize the great achievements of this sterling leadership, beginning with the massive roads infrastructure. I think that has already been cited. I'm not going to bore you with just everything because it's a little bit long, as you can say, because we are so happy with so much has been done. Well, you already had about 19 roads commissioned with solar lights. I saw some of that yesterday, including the General Aguironsi Boulevard, 2005 direct labor roads completed under the Zero Pothole Initiative. The commissioner who took me around, well, I wasn't feeling any bumps, and then he had to remind me that this is one of the Zero Pothole Initiative, and it's remarkable because that's what needs to be the case. There are, in addition, 31 ongoing road contracts across Abia: the Port Harcourt Road, Ohanku Road, People's Road. Some of you may not recognize some of these. I'll just go over them very carefully, very quickly rather. Dualization of Owerinta, Umuahia Road, Umuahia Umunye, and others in urban environment. There's also the dualization of Umuahia Tower. I'm sure that one some of you will have seen. Umuahia Ring Road, Okwet Lodi, Aheke Uguta, Ajaka Road, among others. Well, out there in Lagos, we hear all this, but we really are not in a position to identify them right away. But I have come home now and seen some of that. The Umuahia Uzuakole Abreba Ohafia Road. Of course, you will know, I will know that particularly. And I recall that, as you heard during the introduction, I was studying in the United States in the mid-60s, and I had something to do in Washington. I ran into Dr. Michael Okpara. This is around August 1965. That is how many years ago? 60 years ago. Goodness. Dr. Okpara told me, so he asked me, where are you from? I said, I'm from Umuahia. He says, we have done that your road. Can you imagine? This was the premier of the Eastern Nigeria. He was so enthusiastic about the work he was doing that he found it necessary to tell me that. Way out there in Washington, D.C., 60 years ago. This is the kind of stewardship that we have with us now. Somebody who's ready to tell you, we've done this, we are doing this. You know, we should be very, very grateful. Most of these stretches have been completed and recently commissioned by former President Olusegun Obasanjo. In the health sector, renovations, retrofitting of 200 primary health care centers. I was a member of government under the Babangida administration when Professor Ransom Kuti, Olikoye Ransom Kuti, that was one of his pet ideas, this primary health care, to bring health, as I said earlier, to make sure that if we are going to be among the top 3, it is also with good health and not just numbers, with a high mortality and morbidity. And the starting point for this, of course, is creating this network of primary health care centers across the state. And here they've codenamed it Project Ekweme. Is that right? And Akokwa Kaneba, please give them up. 75% of these are at different levels of completion. And this is only halfway through. So there's so much more to come. Well, there's a lot more. Upgrading of Umuahia and Abia Specialist and Diagnostic Center. That I saw today. My friend, the Honorable Commissioner of Information, was so gracious as to point this out to me today. So I've seen those with my koro eyes, as it were. That exercise brings to a total number of 3 specialist referral hospitals owned by this Abia State. Please give them a clap, give them a clap. There are also 22 ongoing construction of general hospitals, upgrading and retrofitting of Abia Specialist Eye Center that will rank among the best in this country. There is the launching of the Abia State Formal Health Insurance Scheme. Well, it's like, you heard what I said. Nigeria must find a way to make sure that people are not dying of rare diseases, cancer, dementia, all sorts of things, because they cannot afford. They cannot afford it. These are still diseases that are not affecting large numbers of people, but the cost of cure is so high. So I think this is one of the areas the state government is already looking into. There's also a 1.3 billion, you can translate that by your Naira values to know what that comes to. World-class medical facilities to reverse the flood of medical tourism abroad. This is one of the great, should I say, wrong directional flow in our society. We have created a network of a few medical facilities who've trained a lot of people, but lo and behold, they are out there in other parts of the world performing feats, as we just had one of our Abian young doctors that you might have read, performing all kinds of really surgery that is the first of its kind. We need to attract these people back. Of course, each individual still has to make up his mind, but by the state government going out of its way to create these facilities, you can see that they are moving in the right direction. Let me quickly move to urban development. Well, Abia needs urban development. There's no question about that. In recent issues in Nigeria here, people tended to question. They thought people were all moving into Lagos or wherever because they had no place to go. Of course, that is said by people who do not know the area. But having said that, the state government is creating development, urban capital development areas in Aba, Umuahia, and Ohafia. And of course, the intention is clear. As population grows, and you have conglomerates as we expect to come, you have to have these larger units where facilities can be provided in a commensurate number and at least cost to the people. It will suffice to also enumerate other major strides in the power sector. I spoke with the governor yesterday, and he explained to me what they are trying to do in the power sector to make sure that the state government complements what the federal government is doing, what the private sector is doing, to make sure that power development, to establish a fund to support entrepreneurs and all kinds of other areas. This can-do administration has also embarked on the revitalization of various moribund enterprises that have been lying waste. Training and empowerment of 300 youths at CSS farms, the ease of doing business agency, and the public-private partnership investment promotion department. A key area in Dr. Otti's innovative governance is the emphasis on security, justice, and the rule of law. For me to now repeat that again, to guarantee peace that is a sine qua non for sustainable development. Several disbursements have already been made for the establishment of security equipment, an impressive commitment to facilities for the dispensation of justice in all the 17 local government areas of the state. There are distinctive projects planned and significant number ongoing projects under the Abia Waste Disposal and Management Program. So let me now summarize by just identifying a few key projects yet to be commissioned or flagged off or ongoing. This includes the Port Harcourt Road. That one, when you enter Abia, that's the first thing you hear about, the Port Harcourt Road, and it is very well deserved because we know what went on for the last several years, despite the growth of substantial revenue that accrued to the state and so on. There is an Abia project, Abia Airport project. As a commissioner in Imo State way back there, we were in fact close to relocating or building a new airport at the Umuahia area. Of course, that our stint was cut short by changing government, and some of us now moved to Lagos. But I'm so happy to see that there's a new Abia Airport project. There's a new Abia Medical City being considered. There's Abia Media and Entertainment Village. This already tells you about the sheer breadth of the thinking of this administration, because all of this contribute to a very wholesome development for Abia State. There's a new stadium project. I don't know if I should be revealing all this, so I think we all Abians. We don't want to give undue ideas to all these other people to come and copycat, but they are welcome to copycat. It's all for Nigeria. The deep sea port at Azumini, Obuako, and the Abia Estate development projects are still other things that are ongoing. Well, let me now end. There are broader and very notable aspects of the overall vision of the Alex Otti administration. This may be seemingly intangible, soft governance issues that are still very indicative, nonetheless, of the total picture that Dr. Otti has brought to bear on this job. I will simply flag some of them. The state government, as I underscored in my first comments, review comments, is thinking of a reform of the state civil service. Well, we've had President Trump talking about reviewing the American federal structure, but I'm sure that is not the way that Dr. Alex Otti and his team are thinking of going about this. There's a sense of modernization, there's a sense of digitalization. They want to build a broadband access. Some of us don't even understand some of this. You know, we are old stock. a broadband access to workers, and a comprehensive coverage of typographical error. By the end of this year, a broadband access to workers and a comprehensive coverage of the entire state. There are also plans for establishing an Abia digital mall and a digital marketplace, the provision of cloud services, and a device ownership scheme to enable the acquisition of laptops, smartphones, Wi-Fi devices, and other digital associated units. Lastly, and certainly not the least, is the reinstating of what I consider a great social responsibility. That social responsibility is a tradition for the prompt payment of workers' salaries and monthly pensions. This was a core element of the IMO formula. So I'm happy that that is being emphasized here. And this will be done, I understand, on the 28th day of every month. I think that is today. I see some of the empty seats. Maybe people are somewhere waiting for their salaries and pensions. So do we call this the Abia initiative or Abia routine or whatever? There will be people who will give it the proper nomenclature. The OT administration intends to end this sense of rampant borrowing. I've already earlier addressed the issue of borrowing, that the archaic notion that borrowing is the problem. I think they will be in a position to show that far from being a problem, it is a way of enhancing faster, broader growth and the creation of job, the creation of capacity, and the creation of employment. Finally, fiscal reorganization plan. The OT administration wants to underpin administrative reorganization and sustainable social and economic development under an atmosphere of good governance, equity, and the rule of law. Wow, wow, wow. On your behalf, we say to our esteemed governor and his team, well done. Jide nunke unuji. God bless you all. God bless Abia State. And God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Ndewo.